Hi everyone, welcome back to the Decentralized Voices podcast. My name is Daria and today I'm joined by Henri Lieutaud, Head of Ecosystem at the Starknet Foundation.
Hello, Daria. Thank you for having me.
It's a real pleasure to have you today on the show, and we will dive into the Starknet startup ecosystem, BTCFi, and its impact on the crypto industry, and the upcoming plans for Devconnect in Argentina. So, guys, stay tuned for the full episode, enjoy it, and don't forget to share it with your friends who are interested in building on-chain products. So, Henri, please give a short overview of your professional background.
Sure. So I'm Henry. I live in France, and my background is engineering. I studied electronical engineering a long time ago. I worked in the telecommunication industry for a little while, and I went into blockchain. I started by doing blockchain projects for big companies, in particular for insurance companies. Then eventually I moved to be a fully Web3 native, and I started working at Starkware, where I was doing developer relationships and in the developer onboarding and education. Eventually I moved to the Starknet Foundation about 2 years ago, where I'm doing ecosystem work.
For those who are new to Starknet ecosystem, can you share what is Starknet, what foundation does, and how everything works in your ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So Starknet is a layer 2 on top of Ethereum and Bitcoin. So it's a blockchain. It has blocks, it has transactions, it has smart contracts, but it is secured by two bigger networks, which are Bitcoin and Ethereum. And the network has two main entities caring for it. One is Starkware, the company that writes the code. So the code that runs the sequencer, processes the transactions, and so on. They're the lab of Starknet. And the other one is the Starknet Foundation, whose responsibility it is to grow the ecosystem, support the different players that make the network alive. And that's where I work.
Okay, thank you very much. So, how do you see your role in shaping and scaling the ecosystem? What do you do?
Yeah, so I'm the head of ecosystem. So I lead the ecosystem team at the Starknet Foundation. What we do is, in a nutshell, our goal is to try to grow the on-chain GDP. Right. So what we call the on-chain GDP is essentially grow the amount of value creation and value consumption that happens on-chain. We want to grow the number of people producing something that other people use, consume, and value. Right. That can take many forms, right? There's many ways of creating value through blockchain. It can be through creating a DeFi apps that allows people to put their native Bitcoin assets to work. It can be by creating a game that has its backbone on-chain and that users enjoy and play. It can be by creating supply chain systems that enable to give transparency and better coordination in a traditional context like supply chain. So a lot of what we do revolves around finding the resources that, like, talking with those people, understanding their need and trying to solve problems for them. We have a set of tools that we use a lot, and we have a set of tools that, a lot of people have similar needs, right? So we try to tackle those needs with the tools that we've already came up with. But a lot of our work is also trying to figure out, okay, what do these people need that isn't solved yet in the ecosystem, and how do we build things around them?
Really like this metaphor with GDP, and you're like a country who wants to find best talent and best immigrants to come to do something and earn money for the whole for the whole ecosystem.
We want to enable people, right? We want to make it possible for them to succeed. And sometimes Starknet can help, sometimes Starknet cannot. But in any case, we're always trying to figure out how do we create value for those people, because if we create value for people, then it creates value for Starknet.
Can you please share about your transition from developer relations to leading the ecosystem? What made this transition possible?
Sure, absolutely. When I started working on Starknet, the crypto space was in a slightly different place than it is today, right? There was a shortage of infrastructure. Making transactions on Ethereum was extremely expensive. Making transactions on Rollup was still relatively expensive. And so there was a big need for scalability. And the substrates to make scalable blockchain businesses were a bit difficult to use and hard to understand. So the need was to explain to developers what what things like ZK rollup or ZK proofs were and how they worked. And the need was to enable people to build things, right? So we put a huge emphasis on builders, not just Starknet, but the industry in general. A lot of it was geared towards developers and developers and developers, which was great. We definitely onboarded a lot of very smart, talented people, and devs in general are able to accomplish very meaningful things. But after a while, we started noticing that we started getting really good at onboarding devs, right? We got record number of people showing up to the classes we were doing. We got a lot of people capable of writing and deploying stuff on Starknet, but the amount of companies being created wasn't growing as fast as the number of devs coming in. And so we noticed that, in order to start a company, you need more than devs. You need different kind of people.
Products and businesses.
Yeah, and design and marketing and customer support. You need making a company, building a good company takes a lot of different talents, right? And in particular, you need people who have the business vision to be able to push the company forward, solve the need of users, and that don't have some biases that devs may have, in particular in the blockchain ecosystem. I think in a lot of cases in the blockchain ecosystem, blockchain is a fascinating substrate for creativity. You can do a lot of things with it, right? And sometimes devs tend to get fascinated by that and focused on that. Oh, I can do that. Oh, I can do this. And they're more fascinated about what they can do rather than what
people need.
Yeah, exactly. What people need or what people can't do. Which matters a lot more, because if you can do something that nobody really cares about, it's fun to build, but nobody will use it. And ultimately, it's not that you're wasting your time. You can have fun, but you're not going to build something meaningful with that. So we started looking at how we could grow the set of people that were trying to solve these kind of problems. And that's how the work of my team and my job in particular started gearing more about, okay, what does it take to create companies rather than just onboard devs? And so we started adding different kind of initiatives. We started creating new programs to optimize for startup creation. And that's how I got into this ecosystem work. And I will say that it's me, but I've been with the same team for a few years now. Several people have been working with me for 2 to 3 years. And we all grew together for this. It's great. We've got people joining us along the way, bringing in new skills, and it's been a collective adventure. It's great.
Recently, I saw a lot of posts from Starknet Foundation about BTCFi. So, can you please share what is BTCFi and how it works in the ecosystem and what's the concept?
So, well, first of all, if you noticed it, it means we did our job correctly because we wanted people to know about it. So that's good. BTCFi is a set of initiatives that aim at growing the Bitcoin economy on Starknet through Starknet. And so maybe it's worth taking a step back and considering what is why are we trying to solve this problem, and what edge do we have in solving it? When BTCFi came out, I made a post where I looked a little bit back in the past, and I was thinking about 2019. And in 2019, 2020, there were a lot of companies that started getting very popular that were offering Bitcoin product, right? One of the most famous was BlockFi, but you could also think of Celsius. FTX was doing something similar where you would deposit your Bitcoin and get yield on your Bitcoin. Because there are people who are willing to borrow Bitcoin and pay in order to be able to borrow Bitcoin. And if your auditors are paying attention, they're like, wait, these are terrible examples. BlockFi went under, so did Celsius. FTX just sent the industry in a terrible place for years. And they're right. It is true. What happened essentially was that those companies were operating as black boxes, as banks, right? You would deposit money in them and then you would have no idea what would happen there. And just like it happened in the traditional financial sector, it happened in crypto, and that money got lost, mismanaged, and ultimately depositors were affected. And if you're paying attention, you're also thinking, but wait, isn't DeFi solving this? Because when you're depositing money on Aave, yes, you're lending it, but you can see it in real time. You know that there's no mismanagement. You know that there's no shenanigans with your money, right? So isn't it what DeFi is solving? And yes, yeah, you'd be absolutely right. It's actually quite ironical that at the same time that these Bitcoin products were emerging, the DeFi was emerging on Ethereum. And there's a reason you couldn't use DeFi on Bitcoin, but you could use it on Ethereum. I'm going with that is that there is a need for Bitcoin DeFi. And so far it hasn't happened. It hasn't materialized. In the past year, Starknet researcher started realizing by doing a bit more work on the Bitcoin side that there was a possibility to settle Starknet on Bitcoin. So settling essentially means tying Starknet to Bitcoin, just like Starknet is tied to Ethereum, so that there is the possibility of trustless interactions between both. When you're doing when you're using a smart contract on Starknet, it is secured by Ethereum. Ethereum can trust the output of Starknet, and that means that Starknet can use Ethereum assets on Starknet, and you can use it in a way that is close to being as safe as using Ethereum. We now know that it is possible to do the same thing on Bitcoin. We're not quite there yet. We're still doing the research. We're still laying the groundwork to make it happen. But we know that there is a possibility that when you use a smart contract on Starknet, it is verified by Bitcoin, and that you'll be able to use Bitcoin asset trustlessly on Starknet. So that means a lot of things, right? But it means that you'll be able to have Bitcoin DeFi, true trustless Bitcoin DeFi through Starknet. It also means you'll be able to have DeFi that has both Bitcoin and Ethereum assets as core components trustlessly on Starknet. And so that's something that is it is incredibly exciting. I mean, I think that's why it's for this kind of moments that people are in our industry. It's when you're you're doing something and then you push a door and you realize that, oh my God, this is possible. You can do this. I think a lot of people felt the same thing when they first started with Bitcoin. It's like, oh wow, you can do money differently. And then when you start using Ethereum, you're like, oh wow, you can program money. You can do really complex things with smart contracts. Then when you start thinking about ZK rollups and Stark proofs, you're like, oh wow, you can decentralize compute this way. And this was such a moment. It's like, oh wow, we can scale Bitcoin with Stark proofs. It was really amazing. Bitcoin is turning into a key part of the consensus of Starknet. And by staking Bitcoin on Starknet, you contribute to securing the network and you can get yield on your Bitcoin.
I guess we'll see a lot of updates from Starknet about this and a lot of news and implementations.
Yeah, so it's going to be a long road. And maybe that's one thing, you asked about developing the ecosystem. And when Starknet started 4 years ago, there were several designs for rollup. There were optimistic rollups and there were ZK rollups. And optimistic rollup started as sidechains that weren't particularly secure, but had a path to being more secure, had a path to having fraud proof, right? And this started by having a live network and then eventually adding on security. And Starknet did the opposite. We started with things being very secure and then eventually adding things that helped create an ecosystem, right? I think it's fair to say that optimistic rollup probably had the right approach, right? They started by creating an ecosystem, right? And making things easy for people to create apps, even though they weren't super safe. And then they added more safety as years go by. Right.
Yeah.
We had our first share of success and we're very happy with what we did. Right. But this strategy was help them gain traction early on and made things really useful for them. That and being EVM compatible. And so now with this BTCFi thing happening, with this Bitcoin push that is happening, we decided to replicate this playbook, actually. So right now, using Starknet isn't secured by Bitcoin, right? But it will be. We will add those things little by little later on. And the proof will be in the pudding, but you can already see this playing out, right? Bitcoin today is securing Starknet, which is in and of itself a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
But little by little, we will add things that eventually will lead to Starknet being verified on Bitcoin. But we're starting with this approach of let's first kickstart the economy, let's first kickstart the products, and then eventually we will add the security features on. We already are, and there will be many more coming in the next few years. You'll see technical announcements, you'll see product announcement. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, as you mentioned, optimistic rollups, yeah, they definitely were first with more implementations and more products built on them, but ZK has more possibilities to build more secure and privacy-oriented products and more scalable.
For a weird Bitcoin not safe L2. At our core, what we want to build is a decentralized network that is owned by its user, maintained by its validators and sequencers. That requires trustlessness, period. That requires being backed by mathematics, secured by mathematics, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. So BTCFi is a big step in that direction, and it's we're very happy with the way
It's I can call it like cryptography bravery or math bravery, where you like trying to explore and to see what happens if you do this, this, or this.
Well, I think that's the really nice thing. So one of the main differences between optimistic rollups, for example, and ZK rollups is that optimistic rollups are backed by game theory and ZK rollups are backed by mathematics. And both substrates are interesting to build things with, right? And there's game theory in blockchain design anyway. But when you think about mathematics have this absolute aspect to them, meaning that if it's true, it is true. There's no debate around it, right? Game theory is a bit more subtle, right? It's harder to get those kind of guarantees. Whereas with mathematics, it's either true or it's not. And so when you have those guarantees, when you know you can build on top of that, it's extremely empowering because you're not trying to find a solution. You know that there's a solution.
Let's talk more about your ecosystem activities. I know that, and I participated in Starknet Foundation's Founders Basecamp. Also, you had Developer Basecamp. Can you please share what did you expect from these Basecamps and what did you achieve with them, and like the whole concept of these base camps?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, if I can ask you, because you participated in it, what did you make of it? What was it according to you? And how was it? What was your
Um,
perception of it?
Okay, having some experience with startups and with all these concepts like lean startups and all these like more traditional ways of building startups, for me it wasn't something like extraordinary, because I guess it's good basis to understand how actually products can be built. But for Web3 native people who were like born in Web3 and it's their first job or first experience building something, I guess for them it's crucial, because this industry lacks of understanding how products must be built and like where to find revenue. For example, many people still think that they need just code and that's it, so they don't need customer support, designers, marketers, all this like infrastructure. I had a few ideas, but I didn't focus on one. That's why I understand that it could be more profitable and efficient to me if I had one product I could focus.
I wouldn't say the industry or the internet at large misses this kind of content. Actually, there's plenty of classes around entrepreneurship and building startups around there. The best one are probably the one from YC, and they're all online. You can watch them today, right? We're thinking, okay, how do we, we have a lot of devs. How do we get more founders? Well, we can educate devs and try to make them become founder. We can also attract other founders, and I can talk about this in a second. But we also thought, okay, we have a lot of devs. Maybe we can turn some of them into founders, and we need to make people more comfortable and more familiar with what it means to run a startup. And when you want to educate people about Starknet, if you're Starknet, you have to educate people, right? Because nobody else will do it. But if it's about creating a startup, there's plenty of content out there. And so we started saying to people, hey, watch these lessons, do this, do that. It's great, right? But then people really didn't do it that much. And so we thought, okay, so let's do our own class. It's gonna be good, because we're gonna be able to tailor it to the needs that we see. And people on our team have this specific expertise. It's gonna be great. But more than the content, it was about the getting together and saying, here's a date. We do it all together and we push through as a cohort, right? And so that's a lot of the rationale around, and it's the same for Dave Basecamp actually. If you want to learn how to code on Starknet, there's a lot of content on the internet. All the sessions are recorded. They don't change much from one month to the other. So you can learn by yourself. Having an opportunity to learn as a group is something that is valuable to a lot of people. So just as in the past we were doing dev base camps, so boot camps for people to learn how to code. So we started running those founders base camp at the same time to teach people about running startups. And the idea was to say, okay, so we start in August and we all do it together. And then there's a graduation, people get to pitch their idea and do all of this. And that's what you participated in. I agree with you. If you know how to run a startup, maybe a startup, you probably learned a bit, but you already were familiar with what most of the content was, right? My objective with Founders Basecamp was not just to educate people about being founders, but also to educate people, and devs in particular, about what it takes to be a founder. Because not everybody will be a founder. Right? I mean, in a company of 50 people, there's only so many founders. There isn't 50, right? The majority of people won't be founders, and that is fine. You need everything in a company, right? But it is important that people understand what it takes to be a founder and what it takes to run a company. And so just by running those bootcamps, you already change the culture. You make people more able to work with each other. You make them able to understand what a founder is trying to achieve. You make them able to understand what it takes for a startup to survive. And that changes the culture. It changes the outlook of people on things. I think that's one thing we achieve with that, is that the people who came out of there, we are maximizing their chance of being good startup employees or startup participants, whatever they be. That was one of the big objectives they have. Now, that being said, you're right that people who already were familiar with startups, maybe they felt like, I need more. And so we're working on an initiative right now to solve this. So in general, the people think like, I need more. Like you, for example, Daria, you're running your own podcast, right? Which is a sort of business. You're running your own startup where you're creating
I'm
content. Right?
trying to convert it to business. Yeah, now
Exactly.
actually.
Yeah, and it's tough. It's not easy, right? And it's like being a startup isn't easy, and a lot of the time you you're not really satisfied with boilerplate advice or just like random classes. What you need is somebody to talk to give you advice, to give you mentorship, and to guide you through this. So we tried organizing sessions where we connect startups and aspiring founders with mentors who can give them feedback, help them through their journey, which is something that works nicely, but it doesn't scale very well because you need mentors who are very available. And there's for a bunch of reasons, this doesn't scale very well. We started thinking about the people who do, for example, boxing or judo or jujitsu, right? When there's a class of 20 people, not everybody spars with the teacher. The teacher will explain a few things and then people spar with each other and they train each other and they grow together, right? And in the process, they get better and they form bonds, they become friends, and they go on to achieve meaningful things together. We started looking at mentoring and people getting advice on their business the same way. So we're coming up with something we're calling Starktagon right now, which is it's a fun name, right? Essentially, it's a small group of people who have a project, people like you, and we put them in, like we match them with other people who want to work on a topic. Like, for example, I need to think about how I pitch my business. I need to think about my go-to-market strategy. I need to think about hiring, right? And so it's very simple. We put people together on calls. There isn't that many people on the call, maybe 3 or 4 teams, right? And in turn, everybody gets 10, 15 minutes to present their project. And then each other person gives them feedback and tells them, hey, this is what I liked about your pitch. This thing wasn't clear. I think you can provide more value to the people listening to you by doing the X, Y, Z. And this has a lot of really big benefits. One is that it pushes you to practice regularly every week on a different topic. It pushes you to pitch regularly or to talk about what it is you're doing very regularly. So you're growing not only when you pitch, but also when you're talking with other people. It is also something that is extremely valuable for people to form bonds, because if I participate in a session with you, Daria, I'm going to understand a lot more about your business, what you're trying to achieve and the struggles you're going through. And so that makes the surface for connection, potential for interaction with you much higher. And it also creates bond that we can then dig deeper into when we organize in real life events, which we're also doing. That's what we're trying to do at the moment. I like to say that what we're trying to do is a bit like what a startup is doing, right? We see an issue, we try to solve it, we iterate, and then we see what sticks. So Currently, we're trying to come up with a nice set of people to hone the Starktagon logic, and we have a bunch of content, right? It's not just like, oh, let's put people on the call and make them talk. It's like each call has a very specific road plan, list of questions. It's very organized so that you make the most of it. People seem to like it so far.
Yeah, it should be fun and
You should participate in one.
Well, with pleasure, with pleasure. I really like to pitch others and consult people and give them valuable feedback. So that should work. And actually, one more thing, I remember that in my cohort, there was a project Focus 3. I really liked that session with the founder of Focus 3 because it was a real example of product with revenue, with some traction, with users. 6 months after, I heard about Focus 3 from other people, and they mentioned it like an example of a project with normal startup approach.
Yeah, no, you're right. I had the most fascinating experience last year. Actually, I was participating in a student fair in an engineering school in France. I had a small Starknet booth telling people, "Hey, students, come create stuff on Starknet," because I was curious to see whether it was a good channel of acquisition for smart people, right? And when people ask me, "Oh, what it is you're doing?" So maybe you're aware of blockchain and Web3, and they were like, "Well, maybe one person out of 5 would say, yeah, I kind of know what it is." And then I would say, "But maybe Focus Tree." And here it was 2% out of 3 who knew about Focus Tree because it's extremely popular with students. And I think that's something that is, it was a really aha moment for me. Like for the first time, you could see people using a blockchain product without thinking blockchain, which I think is something we desperately need as an industry, right? I mean, everybody knows about the internet, but when you ask people, "Are you using Facebook? Are you using the internet?" Like nobody thinks I'm using the internet because I'm using Facebook. We want people to use Starknet for their backend to serve their users and make Starknet invisible. We don't need users to know it's Starknet. We just need them to be safe because it's Starknet.
So let's talk about the problems Web3 startups face in this industry. Like, what are the biggest problems? Revenue, product market fit, users, or something else?
Well, if I had to pinpoint 3 problems at least, one is designing for a solution rather than designing for a problem. The second one is a user experience problem. And the third one, I think, is related to innovation cycles. So maybe I'll go into each of them in sequence, right? I think the main issue people have, one of the main issue is that people building on the blockchain get fascinated. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning, right? People get fascinated with the substrate, the blockchain, and what you can do, and they don't stop enough to think, is this a problem worth solving? There's this saying, right? You need to fall in love with the problem, not with the solution. So there's too many people trying to create products that solve a problem that nobody has, but just you can build it, so you might as well build it, right? So I think that's a major issue in blockchain. It's a lot of IDs are not trying to solve a problem; they're trying to create a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. So that's one, right? It's a very common pitfall. I think the second one is a UX problem. I like to say that we're so used to eating crap that we forgot how bad it tastes. And I think that, if you use blockchain today, you're going to use a wallet extension. You're going to use, well, not naming them, but there's a bunch of wallet extensions you can use, right? And I think that's something that is, it's unrealistic for billions of people to use those. They're way too complicated. They're way too confusing. You want to do an action, then something pops up. It asks you about gas and transaction fees and signatures. There's no way people will be comfortable with that. When you're clicking a link on the internet in a website, right? It doesn't ask you like, "Oh, are you sure you want to go to this page? Here's the SSL certificate. Please click here and validate that this is the right packet."
Yeah.
And I think that this is something where we forgot that this will fly with regular users. There's no way you onboard normal people with that. So what's the solution for this? Well, you can have centralized solutions. I don't think that's really interesting either because it's really the same thing from traditional finance, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if it's not your
Like
money, it's
online
your coin.
banking. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think there's a lot of potential innovation that needs to happen there basically making the blockchain invisible while retaining the properties that make Web3 unique. And for a large part, it's self-custody. People need to own their assets. They need to be in control of them. And these assets shouldn't be they shouldn't be seizable by other people. Right? And I think that's one major issue, right? You will have people who have good ideas, but it's like, oh yeah, I have this great idea for an app that will solve a problem for pet owners and it's going to be great. They just need to install MetaMask. I'm sorry, it's not going to work with MetaMask, right? You need to find something else. There is innovation in that space, right? But it's still undervalued. So that's one thing, actually, you mentioned focus tree, and that's one thing that focus tree is leveraging from Starknet. It's called account abstraction. I'm not going to go too much in the details, but basically it enables you to create user experiences that are just that feel like Web2. You can log in with an email and password while retaining control of your key. And it's very new. Likewise, Ready, a wallet on Starknet, as a credit card, which you can use. It is linked to a blockchain wallet, which is self-custodied. You don't need to deposit money to be able to spend it. You don't need to deposit it with a custodian to be able to spend it. It's in your wallet. You can either spend it with your wallet or with your card. That's extremely powerful. And then I think that the third issue that startups in the blockchain space are facing at the moment is, I think it's linked to broader innovation cycles, right? So obviously AI is really, really popular right now. But AI didn't start in 2020 or whenever
with ChatGPT.
It didn't start with ChatGPT, right? Actually, AI went out of an AI winter that lasted almost 10 years with the advent of ChatGPT. I was studying AI at school much earlier than that, right? And it was a topic that was really interesting, but there wasn't a lot of effort, and it wasn't a particularly, it was a field where there was a lot of interesting research, but not a lot of product and not a lot of development, because it was hard to figure out what you could do with it in production. I think innovation works a lot like this, right? You have a capacity and it takes some time before you figure out what valuable thing you can do with it. And I think crypto in general is in one of those cycles. We're in one of those periods where we have something that, like, we have a substrate that allows to do really brilliant things. We had a major innovation cycle in 2020 with the advent of DeFi. The substrate was limited. You couldn't do much. So we worked a lot on the infrastructure, and now you can do a lot more. Transactions are very, very, very cheap, but it doesn't mean that we have found really brilliant ideas that are worth working on. And I think that's something that is actually, like, that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But yeah, I like legit new primitives that change what you can do with blockchain are few and far between. There hasn't been a lot in the past 5 years. You can see innovation, you can see people trying out new things, but nothing really has yet caught on. You could argue that stablecoin in the past few years also have been a major innovation, and they're bringing a lot of value to the table. I think that's true. But aside from that, there hasn't been, like, people are still figuring out how to create value with that thing. That can be a bit uncomfortable at times.
Yeah.
But I think also that's when you build conviction. That's when you stop and pause and feel like, is this thing really valuable? Is blockchain really that useful? And that's when you're forced to think yes or no, right? You don't have to have conviction, but I think it is. I think it is valuable. So that's when you have to build that conviction and get convinced that yes, this is the digitization of an age-old process that structures society. Right. I mean, at least to me, that's the most interesting thing in blockchain. It's about the exchange of value, and the exchange of value structured our society. It precedes writing. We invented writing to be able to do the exchange of value better.
Yeah.
And now we're doing this, but online
blockchain.
with computer. It's fascinating.
What should a first-time founder do to start building on-chain product?
I think the first recommendation is, well, it's funny. I actually just read a long post by somebody who is way more versed in this. He's called Graham, is one of the founders of YC, about finding startup ideas. And I think if you're a user of Web3, you're probably one of the best person to start a blockchain product. And the main thing would be solve a problem that you have. Don't solve a problem that you think other people have. Build something that is valuable for you. Build something that you that you think is necessary. Ledger, the company, didn't get started because people started like, thinking, I need a good startup ID. But because the people who founded it had Bitcoin and they were like, the current wallet don't work. We know we can do it better. Let's build this so that we can use proper secure devices, right? First advice would be try to solve a problem that you have. And then when you solve it, talk to your users, obsess over your users. Just be sure to talk with them, be in touch with them, and show them early what you build to get feedback so that they tell you this is valuable, this is not valuable, I like this, I like that. And listen to them, but mostly watch them. Don't listen too much to your users, but look at what they do, right? Maybe they will say, I don't like this, but they will still keep using it. And maybe they will use different paths into your product. And I think that's something that is incredibly important. And then maybe the last thing, there's plenty of things you can say. But if you're building a blockchain-powered startup, think about what unique affordances the blockchain give you, right? Don't sacrifice on user experience. Make a product that is a product. It shouldn't be a blockchain product. Build a good product and then try to think how you can make it better with blockchain. Saying it's blah, but on-chain isn't a value proposition. Because it's on-chain doesn't make it better. Right.
It's very popular actually to position their products like this way.
Yeah, exactly. It used to be valuable. Now it's not fancy anymore, but I think it's a good thing because it forces people to think through, why does building a game with all the assets being on chain and the game logic being on chain, why is it better than building a regular game? Well, that's easy. It's not because it's blockchain, it's because the game becomes unkillable. It's because my users can play the game with the assurance that they will be able to play this game forever as long as they care for it, right? There's this whole movement about games where people are frustrated about developers just after a few years saying, you know what, I'm just going to retire this game. I'm going to shut down the servers and then people can't play the game anymore, right? This won't happen with blockchain games. That's a very clear value proposition that people are starting to recognize. It's not because it's on chain. It's because it's not going to die.
Yeah. First good product and then how it can be implemented with blockchain or without it if it's not valuable. Yeah. What specific goals does Starknet have for Devconnect in Argentina? What do you expect?
Devconnect is the grand mass of Ethereum. It's a yearly event. We're very excited to go there to meet with friends, meet with coworkers. I mean, we're at our core, we're part of the Ethereum ecosystem. So we're just excited to be part of this, right? I mean, Ethereum is a fascinating platform. It's a fascinating ecosystem. Sometimes going to those events is not necessarily something you think about, it's something you feel. You are part of the community and you want to be there, right? So there's part of this, but then as Starknet, you start thinking, okay, so how can we make the most of going to Devconnect? And one of the things is there's a lot of people going to Devconnect. So we're going to try to organize social events for people. The first one is we're going to organize, we're organizing a startup house. So a residency of a week where we're going to bring about 10, 20 startups in the Starknet ecosystem, up and coming people, and we are going to help them work for a week, give them a place to meet with other people, think about their business, and we're essentially going to do a bunch of Starktagon sessions, which I mentioned earlier, right? It's going to be about people practicing together, getting to know each other, bonding and growing their business. The goal is for them to come for a week and go out and feel like they've accomplished what they would do normally in 2 or 3 months, right? We are also going to connect them with capital, with investors, with mentors, advisors that can help them forward on their journey. So we're going to organize several investor-oriented events in and around Devconnect, where we'll have people interested in startups and startups interact with each other and find room for collaboration. And the second thing we're going to organize is we're going to have a major day event, a Starknet day event. I think the date is set. It's probably on the 20th of November. We'll have ecosystem presentation where people will present the groundbreaking products they're working on. We'll have pitch competitions. We'll have nice merch and plenty of opportunities to network. So it will be a great way for people who are in the Starknet ecosystem to connect with each other and people who are curious about Starknet to just come and check it out. See
A lot of things are planned for Devconnect this year, and probably it would be even bigger than DevCon in Bangkok.
These two conferences will be different. I think there was a crazy amount of people, maybe 12 or 15,000. Yeah, something like this.
13,000 or some
Exactly.
12 or
Yeah.
13,000.
Which is massive. I don't know how many people will show up to DevConnect. Those events are always really good. What I like about DevConnect is that it's not a conference, it's a bunch of conferences. So you'll get to come to the Starknet conference, you'll get to go to the Optimism event, you'll get to go to the L2Beat event. There's going to be a lot of really interesting different talks, and I'm also looking forward to attending all of those.
Thank you for great conversation. It was insightful. I really enjoyed, and I'm sure that our listeners and viewers on YouTube will also enjoy it and share with their friends.
Oh, thank you for
very
having
much.
me. I had a good time.
Guys, I will leave all the links to Henri and to Starknet under this episode, so you can go and check out and learn more about what's happening in the ecosystem. Thanks for your attention. Like this episode and share it with your friends.